On him to chime in if he needs. Right.
That's tonight. Too much.
Materials. What it's gonna be like tonight.
That's gonna be
Well, you
so
don't
quiet.
have to help with IT support.
I know.
Okay. That's good. Okay, I'd like to call to order the February 26th, 2024 BOSAC meeting. Roll call, please, Ann.
Sure. Kristen Joyce. Here. Chris Tennell.
Here.
Duke Barlow.
Here.
Nikki La Rochelle.
I'm here.
Perfect. Bobby Zanka. Here. And David Rossi.
Here.
And we're missing Jeffrey this evening, but it looks as though we have Jay joining us virtually. And Jay, please chime in with any comments or questions whatsoever.
Great. And are there any other virtual attendees? Like, okay, got it. Thank you. Minutes. Any discussion on the January 29th minutes, or can we approve?
Bobby does great editing for us and sends us those edits. Those have been made. Oh.
Were they easier for you, Alex?
They were, yes.
I move to approve the minutes.
Second?
Agenda, any discussion or edits to the agenda tonight? Okay, public comment. Thanks for all attending. Anything non-agenda related anyone wants to comment on before we get rolling?
Sure, yeah, if you don't mind, otherwise.
Hi.
And then there's a button right on their microphone. Thank you.
You're
Sharon.
so tall up there.
Right on top.
Thank you. Yeah, I haven't been up here since I was at PD. So Shannon Haynes, I'm the town manager, and I just wanted to take a few minutes of your time. I know you have a lot on your agenda, but I wanted to come and apologize for miscommunication around the potential date change for your meetings. I didn't do a good job of communicating to our folks that what we were really doing was just suggesting that you might take a look at it if that was something you were interested in doing. I think Anne did talk about facilitating communication with the council, certainly in the form of the minutes, but also with regard to land purchases and exec session materials. But it really was just a suggestion to try to make that communication easier. And it was in no way intended to sort of push the commission into changing your meeting night or your meeting time. And so I just wanted to take a minute to let you know that and to apologize for the confusion and again, the miscommunication around that. We hope that you guys will consider what's best for the commission and make a decision on either keeping your time and day the same or making that change, but doing what works best for you. So that's all I wanted to say. I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any. Yep. All right.
Thanks for
Thank you.
coming. Okay, staff summary, please.
Perfect. Well, we've been doing a lot of data collection this winter, trying to help our friends at Gold Run Nordic get ready for the Breckenridge race that happened this weekend. We've heard a little bit of good feedback so far from that event. Don't think we've done a full debrief yet. And we've been continuing to groom as weather permits on our trails. The other update, at a recent meeting, we had a discussion about potential trails, one of which was a dry gulch connection. And we had an opportunity to meet with our Golden Horseshoe Committee with Forest Service and our friends at the county. And the cameras that we set up there partway through the season are showing a lot of elk movement through the area. We'd like to put the trail. And this was a trail that got kind of a lukewarm reception when we brought it to you all. And so we've decided with our partners that we'll hold off and continue kind of monitoring that area to see and get more of a year-round snapshot of what kind of wildlife activity we have there. Ultimately, we're looking for a north-south connection through the Golden Horseshoe just to facilitate a lot of access. And this may not be the best location. There might be something else that we can do, but we do just want to kind of keep an eye on that area for now.
How many cameras do you have in there?
Right there, we just have one. But it's kind of positioned right where the proposed trail was going to be.
If we're considering doing a different connection that's not in the Dry Gulch area, are there ways, or are you already tracking elk or other wildlife in the other like potential areas that we would do a connection?
Boy, the only wildlife cameras we've set up, I believe, are there at Dry Gulch. I think the county has had one on the Swan River restoration, but we don't have any others, but it's a great idea. We're really enjoying a new camera that we found that allows some wireless transmittal of these photos. So we could potentially set some more up. Depending where we look, we might need to go through another NEPA process as we're trying to still gather a list of potential projects for NEPA, but definitely we'll keep our eyes out for other areas. And historically, at least in the Golden Horseshoe, that whole, the eastern end has been really more of a focus for wildlife, especially from CPW and the Forest Service perspective. And so we're really looking at kind of Rock Island westward for a good north-south connection. And other updates, we were unfortunately not successful in obtaining a state trails grant for a lot of our front country infrastructure projects. There was an amazing amount of competition this year, as we learned early on. And the feedback we received actually was really encouraging and really thoughtful, I think, from the CPW review committee. And it's an issue we see with a lot of these different applications regarding trails. The cost for us in small mountain resort communities, right, to source lumber, sometimes to pay for contractors, is a little bit higher than often some of the projects in the Front Range and in other parts of the state. And that was certainly brought up, just the cost that it takes us to complete these projects.
Which is why we needed the grant.
Yep, it's a double-edged sword there, but these projects are really worthwhile. We really do want to continue pursuing those. One of the big projects that was part of that grant is the bouncy bridge on the river trail. It really does need to be replaced. So we'd like to move forward with that. We feel the retrofit of the Trollstegen Trail to wheelchair friendly is really important to us. So we'll continue moving forward with those, and a lot of other kiosk and just kind of general maintenance items we'll probably move forward with, but it definitely would have been nice to have grant funding to cover a lot of that.
Where is the bouncy bridge? Is that the one at the rec center?
No, it is between, it's kind of close to the river park.
Oh,
through
okay.
that
okay.
stretch.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But we have a great grants committee now at the town where we're really just trying to coordinate a lot of these grant applications and who's doing what. So we'll tap into that group as we go forward and see if there's other possibilities for us. And then finally, just a reminder for Tuesday, April 9th, a joint meeting with town council that's been scheduled for 5 to 6 p.m. We don't have an agenda just yet, but we'll be working on that, but hope you all can make that. And should be a good evening.
That's here.
Yep.
Okay. State of the open space, or any questions or comments on staff summary? Okay. Let's talk about this beautiful report.
Yeah, so I think Tony's going to pull it up here and very much in draft form and looking for feedback at this point in time. Our staff have been busy trying to build pieces and parts of this report together. It's something that we really like to take a moment to highlight all of the last year's accomplishments and some of our running totals since our program began. So if Tony, if you want to scroll through and feel free to jump in on anything other than our table of contents. And we just have a little reference to our master plan being adopted in 2023 and working now on implementation of that.
Is it actually fully approved now?
Mhm, mhm.
Because when I went to look for the link, it didn't come up.
Okay, it's a little quirky. I've been having issues with the link pulling up on the website. I can show you a trick to that,
Okay.
but we're also getting a whole new website, so hopefully it'll only get easier going forward.
Less quirky.
Exactly. But we want to keep our master plan goals front and center. So these are the 4 strategic goals. We just wanted to keep those as a reminder and to try and organize our report this way. I think we really like having this at a glance, just some of the quick stats and figures on our open space program. Kind of wild to imagine we've spent over $28 million on acquisitions since 2007. We are definitely over 5,000 acres of preserved land now at 5130. We've kind of held steady in the last year on 68 miles of trails. I need to change our budget there. We had an amended budget partway through the year after the purchase of Dry Gulch. Before that, it was about 2.9. Just some interesting stats on the work of our staff are about 93% of our technician staff time was devoted to trail maintenance last year. We had one amazing weed pull event that captured about 400 pounds of invasive and noxious weeds, thanks to all of you that came out for that. Lots of hazardous trees. We always have those wind events, so over 500 hazardous trees were removed. 8 Friends of Breck events last year, which again was a combination of some stewardship and some land management, trail-related work. We had 117 volunteers. And then we like to track also how many people sign up for a guided hike, either in Cucumber Gulch or some of the ones that we did at Iowa Hill and Illinois Creek. And we had 444 people last summer sign up for those. And here is the full budget before Dry Gulch. And this format looks a little bit different. We have a whole new finance team at the town. And so we're really trying to organize all of our budgets by the personnel, the minor capital transfers. I've tried to put in kind of smaller text there what those are, so you can track those a little bit better. In the past, it was very confusing. We tended to lump everything under trails. It could have been anything really related, from nuts and bolts and lumber to some of our contractors. And that's really not a good way to account for all of these funds. So we're trying to do a better job of tucking them into all of these buckets. Our acquisitions are categorized as minor capital. We have a lot of charges for services that are those contractors and consultants that we use, but that's also our Wellington Oro treatment plant, the water treatment plant that we pay our water department to run. Allocations are all of the town funds that we contribute to. We contribute to a garage fund because they maintain our vehicles. Facilities does a lot of facilities management for us, computers, that sort of thing.
Couple of questions.
Yeah, for sure.
Under budget, you say there's a council appropriation of 3.4 million for the purchase of a property? What property?
That was the Dry Gulch.
That was Dry Gulch.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep.
And under minor capital, you've got it showing at 69%, which 973,000 isn't 69%. It's 69% if you add the property budget in there.
Okay, I will double check all of these. I was trying to make a last minute change and I still didn't fix the budget up at the top, so I'll fix that.
Nothing gets past Bobby.
Oh, she's excellent with figures.
Unfortunately, this is
And
what I
edits.
used to do for a living. So.
Exactly, I know. I should have run it by you first.
Just a question, would you think it would make sense to separate the Wellington treatment plant from the other services? It's just, I know it's not fixed because, we budget for it, but expenses go up. but it's not these consultants and contractors and surveys, we're sort of choosing that every year, whereas the treatment plant, we're obligated to do.
True.
I don't know. It doesn't feel like it's in the same,
Same kind of category.
yeah, I wonder, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, we can certainly take a look at
That's a
that.
big
It's
chunk that
Mhm.
we're just on the hook for every year, and
true.
We pay the whole thing.
It's about $300,000 roughly a year to operate that. And then we do get about half of that back from the county. So we share costs, but we pay all those upfront costs. We get half of that back in our revenue line items.
just a thought.
Yeah, it gets a little confusing for sure.
Yeah, and on that same line item, was DTJ in 2023 or were they 22? Or was it split?
They
I can't
were
remember all the time.
2022.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
But all of our trail contractors, Cucumber Gulch research, all of that ends up lumped into that bucket. But we will fix some of those numbers in the next iteration. And jumping into conservation, one of our strategic goals there, we like to keep these running totals of our acquisitions over time. And you can see just year by year what we've added to our portfolio, 41 acres in 2023. Just interesting to note, the vast majority of our properties are outside of the proper town limits of Breckenridge. And so much of the work that we do is also joint with Summit County. So some stats there for you. And just some of the dollars that we've spent collectively with the county, in town, out of town. A very significant amount of money since our program started.
So we bought 633 acres and they bought, no, out of town, that 4497 is joint.
Mhm.
So that's not just what Summit County paid.
Right.
That's a joint number of us. That's
Mhm.
acreage, not
Yep,
dollars. I get that.
exactly. Yep.
But
Yep.
the 4497 represents purchases
Mm.
that we and they
Yep.
did together, or some of them they did all by themselves, whatever. But
Exactly.
It's a mixed.
Yep.
It's a mixed use.
It
mixed
is, yeah.
Values. Okay.
Yep. We haven't seen the days recently of donations of land, so we're pretty much purchasing for everything these days, but long ago we had some that were donated. Under recreation, we really wanted to highlight trail maintenance, since it is such a big emphasis of our seasonal crew during the summer months. And about 93% of their time was devoted to all of that trail maintenance. Maybe about 5.5 to all the prep work that goes into our Friends of Breck volunteer program. About 1%, all of our folks are out collecting a lot of data, doing a lot of inventories for us throughout the summer. And trail construction this year was really quite minor. About 0.5% of our overall time was devoted to that, either minor realignments and some adjustments, and wheelchair friendly improvements.
Could we change under trail maintenance, instead of just referring to it as 68 plus miles of single track trails, could we just call it trails?
We can do that.
I mean, it's not all single track, right? It's trails.
It's trails. I think we've been trying to differentiate between paved rec path and, which is more maintained by our Streets and Parks Department.
So Bobby and I were arguing about this
Okay.
yesterday.
Go on.
It almost came to blows, but I was safe. I was safe in my car. Do we have, does it make sense for us to break that out between paved and non-paved? And then do we, does it matter if we're doing like double track trails or Jeep trails or things like that? Do we care?
But what bothers me about it is a single track refers to mountain biking. And I'm trying to get,
No.
Yes, look the word up and it comes up under mountain biking every single time.
It's often used for that, but we can also, and sometimes we use natural surface trails.
Natural surface trails, and this 68 miles is single track or natural surface trails. It's not double track. It's not the rec path. It's not ATV trails. It's not county roads in the Golden Horseshoe. It is specifically our natural surface, non-motorized trails.
And earlier in the document, you called it 68 miles of trail.
Okay.
And that's, I mean, it's all kinds, it's trails for everybody, right?
Well, I think, Bobby, that I think it's, single track can mean more than just mountain biking. I don't think that's ever a definition that single track means mountain biking. I mean, there's some trails that don't allow mountain biking that we call single track, like the uphill Mineral Hill, Booty Buster, whatever you want to call it these days.
When I
You know, that's single track and that's mountain biking's not even allowed on that. So I mean, I feel comfortable with single track. I like differentiating it between the bike path, which we do not have jurisdiction over. So I think that's like the intent, which is why single track makes sense to me.
Well, I Googled the word several times and it always came up as a mountain biking term. Because it relates to the width for a single bike.
Hmm.
But that's the same width that a hiker could use though,
Well,
too,
it doesn't
right?
matter, we need more.
Yeah, because I kind of feel like maybe if you were to Google that, it's sort of been co-opted maybe by the mountain biking community. You know, there's like Single Tracks is a popular mountain biking website, for example. So I don't know which preceded, like was Single Track around before mountain biking? You know?
Yeah, by definition, it doesn't talk about mountain biking in the Webster dictionary.
What does it talk about?
Talks about trains
68 mile train.
of a railroad or section of a railroad's route, having but one set of tracks, so the trains going opposite directions must be scheduled to meet only the points. Having a narrow scope, one track. You know, so by definition, it doesn't.
So
fall into that.
originally refers to a train track, not a bike track, so.
And the rabbit hole has started.
Come on down.
We can certainly, we have a little bit of room to add some more qualifiers in there, and we can add some natural surface and other distinctions in there, if that's helpful.
I would argue the only reason to keep it is our intent is not to build wider trails anyway. We want to build as narrow a trail as recreational appropriate. So they're going to be single track trails that we build and have built, not double track or nothing wider than that generally, other than the ADA that might come into.
Yeah.
Or like the Crusher Fine on Wellington Trails, probably. And single track versus, you know, side by side, right? You can walk side by side on a more double track trail or run or whatever you're,
Train.
Snowshoe.
you can drive your train there too.
I'll get on my train.
All right, and we also just wanted to include some of our trailhead planning efforts that we've been engaged in 2023, the Brown Gulch in collaboration with Summit County next to the restored Swan River, the Riling Dredge ADA specific trailhead on the south side of French Gulch Road, and just planning and exploring some of those solutions for the Lorium trailhead to improve safety. So we wanted to capture a few of those. And access and inclusion, this was an important goal of ours in the master plan, and just talking about what we've been doing over the last year with some equitable and inclusive trail designs from the Riling Dredge Trail itself, and making that grades and compaction safe for wheelchairs. The actual trailhead parking area, obviously, we're going to be working on the bridge bump outs this next season. The Sawmill River Trail, I think we need a name next to the Griffith Lodge there, but building a wheelchair friendly trail there. It was sort of flagged in and started last year. It'll be continued again into this year. And part of that also is putting in 2 designated ADA parking spots in that existing parking area there, which we would love to see happen. So that's going to start this year. And then obviously we'll have some new kiosks and information there available with those trails. And our environmental education, all of the events that we do are free and open to the public. So we just wanted to capture some of the hikes that happen and some of the interpretive stations that our naturalists operate. They did hikes in Cucumber Gulch Preserve. They had 304 people on those hikes. They had 145 at Illinois Creek, which can handle a slightly larger group size. And again, at Iowa Hill, they had 117 folks there. They like to do a lot of questionnaires so we can figure out where people are coming from. And really interesting this year, we had a lot of Summit County residents that were coming out on these hikes, which is fantastic. And I think our naturalists like to keep things very fresh and interesting, so they're always changing their hikes, their topics, their themes. They set up interpretive stations when things get kind of busy. They can capture really a lot of people and impart a lot of good messaging, leave no trace in particular. And during downtime, they do rove the trails, see if people need any help, have any questions, can help reinforce some of the etiquette and leave no trace principles there too.
I had a question about your
Mhm.
graph. Illinois Creek had 145 participants and Iowa Hill had 117, but it looks to me like Iowa
did I
Hill
s-
has a taller.
I think I switched those. Let me fix those.
Okay.
Good job, Bobby.
Your 9,
I
Bobby.
know.
Well, we want it
Perfect.
to look good when it gets up to council, right?
I'm glad you got it.
And I'm forgetting, did we brag about the Betty's to Chantilly connection in last year's State of the Open Space? I know it finished in the fall. Was that included in last year's report? Because if not,
I think it was,
okay,
yeah.
just that's like a key access piece that I think we want to make sure we mention if we didn't last year.
Mhm.
I know it was near the end of the season when it happened.
I know, I only realized it was 2022 when it wasn't, when there was no new trails in 2023.
Yeah.
I thought it was.
I just don't remember last year's report, but okay.
That's for sure. And just to recap on Friends of Breck and some other fun stats, we had 8 events, 117 volunteers, 2 work days that were devoted to our front country trail maintenance, 10 acres of open space that were treated for invasive weeds, and about 5,000 feet of buck and rail fencing throughout, which a lot of you participated in at Illinois Creek. So thanks for that. Cold day. In the cold rain. And for stewardship, obviously we have our crown jewel of the open space program, our Cucumber Gulch Preserve, with some of the regular and occurring activities we do there, from monitoring beavers to groundwater and wetlands analysis, our avian species, boreal toads, which we didn't see any this year. And then we just have our ongoing wildlife and trail camera data collection to give us ideas of what is in there. And other land management activities that we've been engaged in over the last year, a lot of forest health measures, from the Peabody placer to getting everything lined up to burn piles here eventually this winter, a lot of weed control. And we've been really trying to do a lot more monitoring and management of our high use areas like the Illinois Creek Trail, the River Trail, and also starting to look at Sawmill as well, and just what we can do to restore some of those areas, cut off social trails, do some restoration. And then our ongoing river restoration just of the McCain property and also Swan. And of course, we have great partners in Breck history, and what was done over the last year is a new roof on the Jessie. So we have a picture of that newly constructed roof there. Tony and I were looking at some before and after pictures back even from 2012 when there was a really significant lean to the structure, and it's really come a long ways and it's looking good.
Yeah, looks great.
And then a big part of stewardship for us these days is really trying to just get a handle on visitor use management and understand kind of where people are going, what kind of uses we're seeing out there, and just kind of look at some of these trends over time. So we just have a snapshot in the next couple of slides of what our trail count numbers are showing us, which is just interesting, I think, to see that evolution over time. We have summer and winter broken up for B&B and Sally Barber, with the average daily counts for summer and winter in 2023, 274 in the summer and an average of 255 in the winter. So those are kind of getting close to each other. And Sally Barber, a little bit less, with 121 on average in the summer and 112 in the winter. And we just have some fun stats of some of those highest days. As you might expect at Sally Barber, the highest day was during the Firecracker 50, but at B&B was just a random Saturday, I think at the very end of September, something like that. It was its highest yet. And we also just have some seasonal trail counters. We do the winter trail counter at the Gold Run Peabody, which we had an issue with our counter. And then we also had the plowing, as you might remember, a year or so ago. So we have a 2-year gap in data there. But we had 164 in the winter months over the winter season. And then Cucumber Gulch, we have 4 different counters: Toad Alley, the Nordic Center, White Wolf, and then Shock Hill. If you take a daily average of all those, it's 588 from July 6th when the preserve opens through the end of September. I think Toad Alley had the highest of 606 people on a Sunday in July. And the next page just has our Trollstigen numbers, which continues to be really popular. You can see during the summer, and this is the trail we've probably had a lot of gaps in our data just from whatever reason with our camera, either it malfunctioned or we had a tree in the way blocking numbers. But on average in the summer, we see about 895 people a day and 632 in the winter.
And you mentioned that there's that double detection issue with going out and back instead.
In the winter months.
Yeah.
Yep, yep. So just to give you an idea of kind of what we're tracking out there, it really just gives us a good idea where people are headed and some of the trends that we see. And that is it for our team. I thank all of you and our council members, all of our staff, and our 2
Especially the
pups.
canine supervisor. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Very cute.
Put the report together. Really nice job.
Really good. Yeah.
It's great.
Thanks. It's a fun creative outlet. But I will make all those edits. I think we'll probably send this over to council. Bobby, if you catch anything else, call me. We'll go over this. Make sure it's all there.
Okay, project list.
Yeah.
Can I
Vicky.
say one thing about the report?
of
Love to hear it.
course.
And it looks fantastic as always. I just one thing I noticed was potentially thinking of incorporating a few more winter photos. It does seem pretty heavily weighted towards summer. So just as we saw in the data, it's getting closer and closer. So I thought a few more
totally.
winter
I'll
pictures
look
might
for
be
some
good.
more winter photos. I was just kind of grabbing what I had quickly.
Yeah, they're beautiful photos what you have now. So I'm sure you've got good winter ones too.
Yeah. Thanks, Nikki.
Yeah.
So next up is our 2024 project list. I think you've probably seen all of the ones on here, but we wanted to organize them in a nice way that also references our master plan, because that's something we as staff are really cognizant of. How are we implementing our master plan? What does, each project relate to? And so let us know what you think about this format, but we were trying to kind of group in our new trail constructions and alignments, where that falls within our master plan references, our expected timeline on that, and any partners that are involved in these. So we have to be named, we'll not call it a Chantilly connection again, Nightmare on Baldy Trail realignment, the river trail replacement, the bouncy bridge replacement, just doing that assessment of the Lorium trailhead. And we want to start planning for the Copper Canyon piece that we own. And now that we have a couple of corners flagged, we can hopefully figure out our boundaries a little bit better on that one.
I had one suggestion on, under the master plan reference. I think it makes it a stronger case for these individual trails if it's more than just one strategic goal that it satisfies. For instance,
Okay.
a new trail also should take into consideration conservation opportunities and that sort of thing. I think we could say that, yes, it definitely is recreation, but there's other things in our strategic plan, that our master plan, that these also
Okay.
support.
Okay,
And I would like to just see it,
Yeah.
make the strongest case possible.
perfect. Okay, yeah, we can certainly do that.
I like that suggestion. Maybe even having like a primary strategic goal, and then, because obviously a new trail connection will likely be mostly about recreation
Right.
or access. But having sub goals that it lines up to, I think makes a lot of sense.
Perfect. Yeah. we can do
Especially
that.
if we can get any of those inclusivity things in here
Yeah,
in any way.
for
I think
sure.
we need to be focusing on that as
Mhm.
much as we can. And if we have something here that satisfies any of that, let's put it here.
Perfect. Yeah, we can do that.
Regretting our nomenclature of strategic everything, though. We have like
Yes.
strategic goals, strategic initiatives. I'm like, which ones are which? Had to go back and like cross-reference.
And yeah,
Oh, I don't think I knew or totally missed it, that there's a realignment on Nightmare on Baldy. Is that just the lower section? Like,
The old section.
Just the old section, that's still used? Okay.
Yeah, we recently acquired that through the ranch dedication. And
Oh.
so it's that bottom piece that we'll work on a small realignment with the county with, so.
Right.
When we were talking the other
It
day,
says it's not that bad, though.
It's sometimes it's actually like,
talking
okay,
about
let's split it.
Weber Gulch, but we were talking about the bottom of Nightmare, not Weber Gulch.
Correct.
I was confused
Yep.
the other day. Okay.
But I think the Weber Gulch lower half
I
too
like.
is something we would like to work on too.
Yeah, no, I get it. Same thing.
Cool.
Similar.
and then just our next category are all of the accessible trail improvements that we're doing, from kind of retrofitting the Trollstigen Trail with the crusher fines. We'll change the planking at a handrail to the boardwalk there to make that accessible. Cucumber Gulch has had, believe it or not, an accessible trail that was put in 2004, but accessibility standards were very, 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 very different back in the day. And it was really the Nordic Center down to the bird interpretive area, following kind of the training loop. Kind of a shortish area of the preserve. And there's been, I think, a lot of improvements on the Nordic Center lawn and whatnot. We don't really have a proper entry point into the preserve from there. So part of our hope is to design a better entry, and people get kind of lost when they go and park there at the Nordic Center. But there's also a pond there now, so we have to construct something to actually kind of get over the pond and into there. And there's a really rooty section of trail also that just needs some improvement down there before you get to the bird interpretive area. So we just want to revive that a little bit and make sure there's that good entry point into the preserve with a kiosk. And if you keep scrolling there, we have our BOEC trail and parking area with a kiosk there, the bump outs on the Riling Dredge Bridge, and finishing up that trailhead kiosk also. So those are the big accessibility projects that we're planning on for this coming season. And our stewardship projects after that, Tony's explained a little bit, I think, over a couple of meetings, just our hope to really achieve this gold level site designation for Leave No Trace and what that means. It's a lot of training of our staff and some of our partners that we work with. So that's kind of ongoing in the background.
Is that for our whole system? It's not
Yeah.
specific trails, and it's the whole thing.
That's the hope. The other project that we have coming up this summer is the Keystone Drill. Breck History is working on that, and that, as you know, is going to go at the B&B trailhead a little bit off trail with its own accessible trail to that structure. And they're going through their permitting process at the county. So hopefully that will be moving sometime this summer. Our Friends of Breck trail events, we're looking at potential projects right now and potential partners as well for those particular projects. And our signage work plan, which is in the packet this evening, and then just continued visitor use management and tracking numbers. And we're working with friends at the Forest Service, the Volpe Center, the county, other municipalities, just kind of getting a handle on a lot of trailheads and use. And so I think that is everything on our work plan, but wanted to see if we're missing anything. We can certainly make better references to all of the master plan goals and identify those priority ones.
Like all this we've talked about before, so it's nice to have it organized and consolidated, but.
Sorry. I have a quick question. Some of these are in terms of the new like trail projects. Having looked at the budget and the overview from 2023, how do you guys feel? I mean, Copper Canyon can be a pretty considerable project. How does that kind of line up with how we spent over 90% of our hours on maintenance? does that take away? Like, are you concerned at all about lack of maintenance while we're constructing something pretty significant, or how does that work? Or is it
And-
all going to be contracted out?
And not this year. I think what we're going to be doing is a lot of planning efforts, which
Yeah.
our trail technicians likely won't be involved in.
Right, this is like a couple
Yeah.
years out question.
Be planning and just given the crazy terrain of that property, I think a lot of it is probably going to be contracted and machine built because it's really tricky. But it might also be an opportunity to fill in the gaps with some Friends of Breck events next year. But that is something that we're considering. We always want to make sure every trail is maintained and that we put a focus on maintenance, but there's plenty of space to work in those new construction projects and Friends of Breck events too.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Kristen. And a lot of these larger projects, we will contract out so we can still maintain that focus on the maintenance.
Are we doing, my other question real quick, are we doing anything on McCain in the coming year? Does that need to be on this plan at all? Or are we tabling that for a while?
I think, I think is up to you all if you want to start doing some planning efforts. I don't think there's going to be kind of on the ground construction until that vegetation has taken hold, which is probably another year or two for that, and still waiting for some of these other pieces of the McCain property to come together to find out where our boundaries are. But I think planning for sure, if you'd like, we could add that to this
Well,
list.
maybe just along the same lines as Copper Canyon is
Mhm.
only planning, so
Yeah.
if we're gonna have that, might as well have
Mhm.
initial conversations about.
If this is the complete list, if it's not on this list, it's not gonna be discussed or planned or worked on. If something comes up, we could still do it, even if it's not on this list.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's the nature of things that projects come up, and we can evaluate them, but we wanted to have at least a good work plan going into the summer.
I haven't given up with getting Aspen Alley on.
Oh.
That's NEPA.
Yep.
I don't know if it falls into the realm of a project, but our directional trail efforts where we're gonna kind of test and practice on a couple of those, is that to the level of this list, or is that something that's just an ongoing project that you've been working on, Tony?
Yeah, I think, we've got some great, like recommended loops
Yeah,
and
yeah.
stuff like that. Yeah, I think we've got a good list of what we want to put out there. I think next steps is working with our sign contractor and really just figuring out how we want to sign them on the ground. So once we get a little bit more information with the contractor, we'll come back to you guys again and kind of go over that list that we formulated and see what makes sense, and then figure out how we want to get the word out on those.
Okay, great.
Groups not need to be on this list, or just even notionally plan to develop
Yeah,
multiple loops.
we kind of clustered it in here. My
Oh, I
thinking
see.
was in the
Just-
sign and planage, improving wayfinding.
Visitor use management's got it, recommended trail loops with on the ground. Okay, gotcha.
Great.
Yeah, thanks for the feedback.
And just thanks for putting this together. It's nice to have it all in front of us before we get into the season.
Time gets away from us.
Yeah, so signage RFP.
Yeah, so we have a draft RFP included in your packet, and there's a lot of boilerplate language, as you might imagine, that kind of goes with a lot of the town RFPs. But we went through our BOSAC meeting minutes from last summer, which is really when we were kind of taking a deep dive into some of these things, and tried to compile all of that into this RFP, but really looking for feedback if we're on the right track, if we're missing anything. I think the challenge for us was to craft something that leaves kind of enough flexibility for a contractor to work with us all to kind of figure out how it comes together without being too prescriptive upfront, but put enough kind of background information and identifying some of our needs in there. But would love to
And
get
I
your
guess it
feedback.
comes as a surprise to nobody that this is really what I focused on. 'Cause
Sure.
This isn't what I used to do, but I do have a lot of background in contracting, and I do have a bunch of questions.
Okay.
And just going from the top to the bottom. And very first line, deadline, what does MST stand for?
Mountain Standards.
Be Mountain Standards.
Like, yeah, initially I had this drafted to go earlier and we ran out of time, but
That was a
here we
trick
go.
question.
It was totally.
Well, it could have been mountain savings time or something like that, but,
We will make that change. Just do empty.
all righty. So, it says that the deadline is, proposal is 4 PM. It'll be mountain savings time by then, but daylight savings time. But in some other places, it says before 4 PM, which means 3:59. So let's be consistent and
Okay.
make it at 4 PM. Don't say before 4 PM. And
Okay.
it does say that in one of the places where you've got a time thing. RFP timeline, all other dates may be adjusted without notice as needs or circumstances dictate. I wasn't sure what that was telling us, anybody who's reading this.
I think that if anything comes up that we haven't heard of, if we don't get any applications in the door whatsoever and we need to extend the timeline, if, interviews
That's
get.
under deadlines for proposal. That makes sense, but you've addressed that. You say it will
Yeah.
be. But I wasn't sure what other dates might be adjusted.
I think the lesson learned from our master plan is that all of our deadlines kind of went out the window just with other ideas, other projects, other aspects that came up. So we just want that flexibility. And honestly, I'm not entirely sure how long it will take someone to design a signage plan. We were thinking by the end of the year, but if for some reason it needs to spill over because we need more meetings, we need more ideas, then we just need that flexibility.
And that's where you start running over in budget, is all that need
Mhm.
for. That's why it needs to be pretty clear what you're expecting them to do so that
Yep.
they can price it and you can
Right.
decide that they've met that requirement and we're not going to have them attend 5 council meetings or 4 extra BOSAC meetings, that kind of thing
Mhm.
needs to be identified. I didn't see anything in here that said just what kind of contract they're going to end up with. It'll be a consultant agreement, but there's no payment provisions. It doesn't say, are they paid on a time and materials basis? Are they paid cost plus a fixed fee? Is this a fixed price? What is it?
I don't know if I know the answer to that. I feel like with the last round, we had folks who had different approaches to financing. And we wanted that flexibility. Some people were like, no, we bill monthly. Other people were billing at project stages. So I think we're open.
But it's hard for that to be evaluated between the different offerors if they're not basing their prices on the same consistent plan. Do you pay monthly? Is it cost plus? I couldn't tell from this
Okay,
just what kind of contract they're going to have.
okay.
Just on that, and I'll let Bobby continue, but are there criteria that the town typically uses for RFIs when it comes to things like these that we can maybe lean on the town for some of this sort of information?
Probably is.
Yeah.
Right.
And we've tried to include just the types of,
Because it does, yeah, it seems like a lot of this is language taken from other RFIs, so it just might be a good place to look if that is needed.
Yep.
If we do want to clarify, we can maybe
Mhm.
look at how similar projects have been
yeah.
addressed.
Another one that the town has done. So
Mhm.
I don't
Mhm.
have that reference point to say, oh yeah, everybody expects this kind of language.
Right.
I just didn't have that. And I tried to go to that link signage work plan Arcus and I had trouble getting into it.
Was it asking for a password? We can have
Yeah, I was
Alex
asking for a town password.
make that open.
Public all the way yet. I'll make sure that it's public.
Okay. And then right above 2, the signage work plan must complement the existing signage of our partners at Summit County Open Space and Trails and U.S. Forest Service Dillon Ranger District. So could they just go and copy what they do and that does complement it? I don't know how they respond to that.
I think that because we have so much joint land and we manage our lands seamlessly, as we call it, across boundaries, that we need something that's not completely wildly different. And so that's what we've discussed with our partners is let's try and do something complementary that's not forcing our partners to suddenly change. Forest Service is under their federal guidelines. They're really kind of tight restrictions about what they can do for signage. But we don't want to do something for the county that causes them to have to change their signage throughout the rest of the county.
So this
So-
proposal would say in Breckenridge town proper for our trails, it might look like this, but in a joint trail, it might look like that.
It's a possibility, but I think that we want something that's seamless across our network and, but, you know, I think we're open as well to seeing what consultants come up with. I think that's the approach that Pitkin took with theirs because they have a lot of cross-boundary projects and that worked really well for them. And
how
that's
do
kind of
they
a
go
lot of
about-
similar language.
Where do they get that information? Is there some place they go on the county website to find it?
Defined what?
To find what would be seamless. They have to know what theirs is to know that we don't want
Mm.
red borders because they have blue borders.
We can get all that information to our contractors and the federal guidelines are published and out there as well for the Forest Service.
So we're going to bind an experienced contractor into a formal agreement, but I don't see the formal agreement here for them to look at, to know what their terms and conditions are.
Probably a services agreement that the town executes.
But shouldn't that be an attachment here so they can
We-
see what they're
no.
getting into?
Mm-mm.
Legal would build it.
Yeah,
Once they're awarded, then they go into, I mean, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, that's.
but
kinda-
no, that's
Know
typically
how
the
they price
process.
it if they don't know what their terms and conditions are. Because that makes a difference in what they have to consider in pricing something.
Well, as I understand it, the respondents will provide pricing scenarios.
Mhm.
The staff, and I guess us, will evaluate the RFP based on price and a bunch of other criteria. So the winner would actually go into execution with legal department for a services agreement. So that dictates, that spells out.
And that could change their pricing completely.
No, not
No, it's
really.
tailored to that.
It would follow the actual bid, which becomes an exhibit in the services agreement.
So they make up the terms and conditions? Because there aren't terms and conditions in here of any consequence.
Well, typically you guys already have a set terms and conditions that are set by the town for payment and
So is there some reason why that's not an attachment here so they know what they're getting into?
I have not seen anyone request that before. But,
Yeah, because then they get to claim that it was unclear.
well, there's always a
to sign
question
it,
period
right.
as well. Yeah. Where they can send in all their questions to us and we publish those answers.
It just strikes me as odd that that it's, okay, well, if that's the way it's done, that's the way it's done. Strikes me as a little bit strange. So on G, any proposal received after the bid closing date shall not be considered. Okay. No, not responsible for any delays in delivery of the proposal. Improperly marked proposals. What is that?
Boy, it could be missing the mark on, I'm not sure, either the title, the deadline.
Well, and then
This
it's
is our
late.
standard
That's the whole
boilerplate, but
category of
yeah.
late. But it sounded like there must be some required markings, but so that if they're improperly marked, then they are they're non-responsive.
Right.
But I couldn't tell what that was.
It's mainly on the first page, the format of the proposals. That's really what the format that we need, and we need everything to be directed that way
What are you referring to?
of proposals. Like,
so
in the
subject line RFP underscore, blank Breckenridge open space. So if they,
I guess if they sent you a hard copy instead of an email proposal.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. Oh, RFP time schedule. On March 15th, you're going to get your questions and you're going to answer them the same day?
where's
We'll
the-
put in a couple of days after that for sure.
That's on page 45 of this document.
Yep.
RFP time schedule.
I think is that a
Alex, you must be a
Friday?
genius if you can get them all done on one day.
A few days.
And for December 15th, 2024, plan completion, is that the submission of the signage plan, that's,
Mhm.
that's what plan completion
Mhm.
means. Um, so part 4 is your scope of work. And it talks about reviewing and considering and considering and considering and reimagining. Where's the actual deliverable?
That's where we want a lot of flexibility from all the RFPs that we've reviewed and trying not to be so prescriptive. Following a little bit of what Pitkin County did, that these are the things that they need to take into account and review before they can, they have to review everything from our, our partners signage, our signage to be able to, start this. So that's why there's a lot of the review in there. We have a lot of guidelines. We want those to be taken into consideration as well. But if you have ideas on how we
Well,
can,
It's just they have to
Clarify
do
that.
all that while they're coming up with their plan, but what they're submitting to you is a plan that does certain things.
I agree with Bobby on this one. I think that there's a lot of considerations, but there isn't really an ask in the scope of work. And I think that that can definitely be clarified. And if we need to have a conversation about that here today, we can. But I do agree that there's a lot of considerations, but there's no real request made at the end of it.
Mhm.
But wouldn't that be in, part of the, under part 5, under RFP requirements on section D, things like the timeline, et cetera, those are where you do get into specifics. And that to me is kind of where you're leaving it open to the flexibility of the respondent, since they would, I mean, I'm guessing that you guys were attempting to not prescribe necessarily what the doctor is going to do, but you need a doctor,
Right,
right?
correct.
So that's kind of,
Yeah, I still think a scope of work, the way this reads, this is like the definitions before something happens. I hear what you're saying. I think that there is some room for them to put it into the timeline. But I think there should be something in the scope of work that says we would like to see a final like signage package that incorporates the above, considerations so that we can have XYZ type of signage in the future. And it doesn't need to be like, that's as prescriptive as I think it needs to be.
Okay,
But I think without that, the scope of work is just a set of things to
Wishes.
consider.
Yeah.
Yeah.
okay.
see, I looked at that as like, you are going to provide wayfinding signs, you are going to provide regulatory signs, you are going to, and then the text underneath was, that's what you, in the process of creating those, that's what you are considering.
See, I totally read that differently.
Yeah.
Yeah, I read it as we have all these things and they don't match. So maybe if the intent was more like David's, then we can maybe just, kiosks I see like reimagine, but all the other ones just say consider. And so it makes it seem like we're considering all these disparate types of signs that we have right now. And what we don't say at the end is we'd like them to be more cohesive. But I see how now that I'm reading it the way you interpreted it.
And I'm used to companies that will take every word and parse it.
No,
Yes.
really?
Yeah.
We can rework this, either be more clear on each of these items under the scope, or do a
Yeah.
also concluding sort of new line about that.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't mean, I hope it doesn't sound like, I understand that we want to keep it broad so that we can see what people are proposing, but I think there needs to be a little bit more of an ask in the scope,
Okay,
like a final section of it. That's
Okay.
like, at the end, we'll have a signage plan that allows for all these things to be more cohesive and better wayfinding, et cetera, et cetera.
perfect. Yeah, we can do that.
Sorry, I jumped in there, Bobby.
No, I
are you
appreciate that.
have more on your list?
Yeah, I do. Oh, under etiquette signs, can we add no poop left behind? We've got a lot of other things under etiquette signs, but
Yeah, we can do that.
so under the RFP requirements, And I guess really what you're talking about is the proposal requirements, right? This is what they're supposed to submit, a cover letter. It should be no longer than 2 pages. Is it a big deal if it is longer?
I think we would evaluate that when we see it. If it's
mean-
10 pages, yeah.
In in DoD contracting, if you say it can be 2 pages, if it's more than 2 pages, you don't read the other 10 pages. You just throw it out. So I just know if how this seems
Mhm.
like for this kind of a proposal, you've got a lot of flexibility because the language is broad. And that's what you intend.
Mhm.
Okay. And you don't have problems with that. Okay.
Mm-mm.
Under feasibility project timeline, the proposer is encouraged to review the site to determine the scope of the project. What does review the site mean?
I think it's showing them examples around our system, from kiosks to on trail to intersections.
Are you going to be leading them around or are you just going to say
We're-
go out? And
We're gonna have
wander?
to, yeah,
Okay.
we'll have to have a lot of staff involvement there.
But you might even say that so they know that expect that you're going to be having a meeting to take them around or something. And so the total project under budget, total project budget shall not exceed 75,000. So that's the maximum that you're willing to pay for for
Mm-hmm,
this plan.
mm-hmm.
And you have a couple of things that could end up costing you more because it's at least one meeting, at least one this. If you're prepared then to pay more if you have them come to 3 or 4 meetings. Because that's what will happen. They will bill you for more.
Right, I mean, that is the intent right now, is one meeting each with council and BOSAC. And if something changes where either you all request more, then that's either something that has to go out of the budget or we add more. I think that's what we need to just keep in mind.
And anywhere in here, are they supposed to estimate what it would cost to implement their plan?
Trying to think I don't think we did put in that.
Thing we would want them to tell us, just what is this going to cost us if we do that?
I think we were trying to avoid getting a contractor so involved in the nitty gritty, like sourcing of
You're gonna
materials.
blow the budget up by
And
that.
yeah,
'Cause
yeah.
that's a,
But not do it, but just tell us what the.
yeah, but I think that
implementation costs
would be a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot of work just to source
Spec'ing
stuff
that
and
out.
spec out all those materials.
So how are we gonna scope this so that what we get isn't a Tesla plan, but instead is a GM plan?
Well, who's to say which we want?
Well,
one we want.
they're not telling us what it's gonna cost, so how are we gonna know what we've got?
Like Tony, you would probably have a good ballpark idea when you see
Yeah.
the suggestions of signage and materials and locations. And we could be like, well, we could never afford that, or this,
When you're doing environmental signs, you'll take, like, I look at this as, because I've responded to proposals like this before. You are providing design guidelines. So you're gonna present, obviously your concept and then follow the rules about how you work with our partners and their signage. And so they would present to us and to staff various design iterations. We would say, okay, we really like this. They will probably show examples, obviously. And they may say, yeah, they'll probably spec out, this would be a wooden sign, this would be carcinite, this would be, various materials. That's a little bit different than saying you're going to need 70 carcinite signs and they're this color and they're vinyl cut lettering. And we've spec'd out the cost of these is $90 each for a total of that. That's when you get into spec work. So Tony and staff would take whatever that design iteration is and look at implementation costs. So if they presented something that was, solar powered or something like that and
Mhm.
had a lot of, kind of Tesla-y type things, then I think some questions by you, I think you asked questions, or I've heard you ask questions before. You would probably it'd be within your, kind of your scope to say, well, this looks like a very expensive sign. How are you imagining this put together? And that puts them on the spot. But to me, this is more a design phase because the actual construction and execution is going to be done internally, right? And then you would hire a sign fabricator. You would give them these specs because they will have the typeface specs, they'll have color specs, size specs, and then a fabricator will tell staff, this is going to cost this much, because for a $75,000 contract, there's no way that you could get that for $75,000.
So will we be, whoever is the evaluation team for this, will they be able to sort between the company that has an absolutely stunning looking package, and we think it's going to cost 3 times what this guy's pretty decent package is going to look?
Well, we're not doing spec work where the designers are going to present something and then we're going to choose the winning design. I don't think they're not presenting that in their RFP.
What are they giving us?
Exactly what's in the RFP, the cost for designing each one of these
So
elements.
then there's a follow-on RFP to negotiation to get from them the actual package that shows the plan, the signage plan?
They're going to tell you what they're going to give us, like a sign guideline and design. They're going to present us with concepts and designs. I don't know how many. They will probably specify how many iterations they'll show us. So we will give you 3 different iterations. You will pick one, or we may all debate and say, we love this, we don't love that, kind of the way that we've done other projects. Although this is a really subjective role. It's what we were talking about at dinner. Like it's not shipbuilding, right? You're not looking for specification, of widgets and things like that, or bolts that might be missing. But you're looking for what we're paying for is the expertise of this respondent. And what we're looking for is somebody who has done this before, who's done a great job. I would expect they would present their portfolio and work that they have done. And we could say, wow, they really thought through a lot of the things that we as a staff and board really care about. And then we would choose them, and we're choosing them for their expertise. Now, they may come up with something that we just dislike. And that's where the conundrum comes in, is where you kind of either manage them or say, yeah, this isn't great, we'd like you to go back and do it. It's risky, but otherwise you're asking people to do stuff on spec, which is not really a great way to work on design, is when you would just put an RFP out and say, come up with your best idea. It's like a design contest, and we'll pay the winner for that. What's kind of crappy about that is you're asking somebody to give up their IP, their best thoughts, and they may not get paid a dime for it. Only the winning one gets paid. And that is, in the design world, it's unethical to do it that way when you're hiring somebody.
So what we get out of this isn't actually a sign plan, it's just somebody that.
At the end of the project, yes.
So
I mean,
this-
correct me if I'm wrong. Okay.
You've explained it very well.
$75,000 get us a sign.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
We just won't see the plan when we choose the contractor.
Right. But for that 75,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to deliver a sign plan. And
Bobby, the one thing though is 75, that's what we're starting out with. We may get bids that no one goes under 100.
Yeah.
If that's the case, then we'll have to reassess. May have to
Mhm.
bump up the salary.
or make it a little tighter what it is you're asking for instead of as broad as this seems to.
Well,
be.
I think they're going off of what we have all said we need and what's been advised. Like I'm not sure. I would like to just do something to fit our budget as much as I'd like to make sure we do this right. And because this is a hard thing. I think about trying to complement the other signs. If I were a designer, that would be my biggest
Yeah,
challenge.
that to me looked like a huge black hole of cost.
Well,
Because you're gonna have to spend a lot of time trying to figure out what everybody's signs are and what does complement mean. We don't ever tell them that. They get to come up with their concept of what complement means.
Nikki, jump in, but I know that that's always the biggest conundrum in the design. When you're designing stuff, you don't know what you're getting into because it's a subjective It's a subjective business. You know, I'll know what's complimentary when I see it, right?
Right.
And what you think is complimentary may not be what Chris or Kristen think, right?
Right.
So it's kind of a challenge.
Okay. Under insurance requirements, I don't think the town is going to be named as an additional insurer under the commercial liability insurance policy. More likely to be an additional insured.
Okay, we'll double check that.
Maybe check
There
with
it is.
Kirsten about that. Under submittals, proposals shall submit proposals for this service as outlined in the request for proposals and scope of services, or an alternately developed plan is developed by the proposer. So he can, or they can just submit something that doesn't really comply with what we've asked for, and you'd at least consider it. Is that what that's saying?
Yep.
Okay. Evaluation criteria and weighing. I think you mean weighting, and I don't see any weights.
Oh, you know what? We decided to strike the weights
Okay, we'll just.
because
take
we
it
don't
out.
want to be held to them, so we'll take that out.
Okay.
Yep.
Instead of being evaluation criteria, this looks like more requirements of submission. So the proposal shall prepare a brief statement about approach to service. That should be required earlier, and then you're going to evaluate that statement. But here's where you tell them to provide that statement. List of similar services. The proposal shall submit examples of work with governmental agencies. I mean, that sounds like you want an experience criteria in the proposal, and then you'll evaluate it. All of these things seem to be things that you're now requiring, but they should be required already if you're going to evaluate them.
It's general guidelines for us to objectively score every proposal that comes in the door. This is something we've borrowed from the county that has worked very well actually for them without trying to limit ourselves to certain percentages there. But those are the things that we typically look for when we're reviewing proposals, like what's their overall approach? Have they done this kind of work before? What does that look like? What's their availability? They may say, hey, this is a great project. We're ready to do this next year. You know, those are the types of things that we want to see. Are they within our budget? Are they strongly over that? What
So
kind of
all they really
references
have to do in order to be evaluated by you is submit these things, A through E, because you're not evaluating any of the rest of the stuff they've submitted, just this.
Well, there's
is-
still application requirements above.
Yeah, this is just how
This is
we
weighting,
internally are
yeah.
going to be evaluating and
And if they don't have
looking at
any work
these.
experience with government agencies, they just won't submit any. But it's just something that they want to consider if they have.
So where is it that you evaluate all those other things in the beginning of this that you want them to do?
Well, when they actually present us the work, am I following you?
This is your evaluation criteria. This is how you get to evaluate them. And it doesn't tie into what you have asked them to submit, except for A, B, C, D, and E. And they could provide A, B, C, D, and E and say, that's all you get to evaluate me on because that's what you said.
But to get the job, right? Is that to get the job? What else would you put in there to?
Well, you've asked them to do all this consideration and reimagining and stuff.
Well, that's part of the actual project. then.
Yeah,
That you're not going to evaluate
the
it?
subsequent phase, it looks like they're on the short list, and then you might get some of this other.
Right, so that's under selection process. If I'm following you, because that's under what you're talking about is under section 4 under scope of work.
I'm talking about the selection process. How do you decide among the companies that submit offers? Hopefully you'll get more than one, which you're going to accept. And under normal contracting rules, you could only evaluate them the way you say you're going to evaluate them. And that's all that's under B, evaluation criteria. And all this other stuff they submitted,
That,
What
that's
else
the
would they
short list,
submit,
as
though?
it says. We go through all the proposals. We pick the top 2 or 3 that we really want to bring in for interview. And these are the things that we're really trying to narrow it down as we're trying to select between those top.
But what you say is
Proposals.
your evaluation criteria is how you're supposed to pick that group.
True, but so the selection process is the main category. Under that, number A is submittals, which includes the cover letter and everything above. So that is part of their selection process, is what they've
Mhm.
submitted in their cover letter and their budget, A through E.
So all of that reimagining and considering stuff, how does that play into your evaluation of them? Because that's what you said the requirements were.
We're saying the requirements of the short list. We're gonna go through all of these and review them with the committee that we've outlined. And pick the ones that we feel are hitting the top marks, that are hitting, the scope that we put together. And then it always gets tricky trying to evaluate when you have your top 2 or 3, like, well, how are we gonna really vet these? Well, let's look at their approach. Let's look at their availability. Let's look at their cost. Let's look at, their previous body of work, if they've done this type of thing before.
But this is a brief statement as to how the service will be approached and submit some, you're going to ask for some experience, examples of other work. Staffing, you're going to get that. You're going to get all costs necessary to provide, that's your cost line and references. Where does it, where do you get all this stuff in the beginning that you told them you wanted them to do?
Under A,
A,
selection
submittal.
process A,
Brief
submit.
a brief statement. It's not a whole, it's not a whole project. It's a brief statement as to how they're going to approach it
But
and the schedule.
Saying they're going to consider all of the things in A through E above, in the request for proposal, the scope of services. All of these things are in number 5, RFP requirements. Maybe it would be better if we put RFP requirements in that line to just say, I mean, is this language that we got from the town? Is this how other,
Mhm.
so then I think that this isn't a question for us. This is
Right.
probably a question for the lawyer, town lawyer, to just
Okay.
see if this boilerplate language is legally compliant and gets what we're getting at.
I just want to make sure that you get to look at all the other stuff, not just these short things that are under B, evaluation criteria. And
We will.
if it's not clear, then somebody could protest that you evaluated them on all this other stuff, but you only said you're evaluating what's specifically listed here. That's all.
But in 5, you have RFP requirements.
But
And those are de minimis of what in order for them to even be considered, they have to provide these things. In order for them to make the short list, that's where the evaluation criteria comes in.
so an evaluation criteria it doesn't say anything in here about a short
Let's
list.
keep going.
Sentence, but we'll, yeah.
Maybe, I think some of these questions maybe staff can, deal with.
Yes.
I'm glad to have a few one-on-one with
Okay.
on some of these. And if there's any global issues, things that you see are missing or that, maybe those that numbers let us know. So that we're-
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, for sure, this is your area of expertise, Bobby, but I think that's the point. Big global stuff, let's talk about, otherwise you can provide your expertise.
So maybe I could call Kirsten.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Anytime. Yep.
Okay.
Excellent. And we'll adjust any timelines as we need to in there just to keep things moving, but perfect. All right.
And my one small comment was on the types of signage you listed. I think we had previously identified temporary signage as a category.
Temporary
yeah.
signs. Okay, excellent. We can add that in. Do you,
Great,
Nick, do
thank
you
you.
have good examples of that too, off the top of your head?
EDPHE wants to see your ticks. Was one I saw today. That's a temporary sign.
Well,
Thick is
yeah.
coming through here,
Okay.
or, yeah,
Yeah.
the tick signage right now, it's true.
Caught my attention today.
Perfect. Okay, that's great. We'll add that in.
There's some bulletin about, if you see any ticks, they want you to alert this. They're trying to track tick populations.
Gotcha. Okay.
Thanks, Nikki. It's okay.
Sure.
Okay, well, thank
Right.
you for that. And Bobby, we can follow up and go through this. The next on our agenda was just the meeting schedule, and you all heard Shannon say this is really your call on this. We discussed it at our last meeting, just per the BOSAC rules and the procedures that we follow. You have a month to kind of review this proposed change before making any kind of a decision. We would love to take a vote. I know, and thanks everyone for filling out the doodle poll or letting me know available dates on that. And the next 2 months, I think March and April are really problematic. For a lot of people, they also fall within some other school district breaks. The month of May, we don't meet on Memorial Day, so we typically meet on the third Monday anyway, and that's usually our annual open house. So proposed dates, if you are all in favor, or if the vote passes to change the date to that third Monday, are listed here. I would suggest if folks are in favor of this meeting change that we start it in May, which is the open house. But would love to see if you are ready to take a vote on this.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Sorry, people,
Of
but I've got a
course.
question.
No worries.
No, I'm sorry. But,
Okay.
based on what Shannon said, it's not about the minutes, it's about time to especially evaluate purchase decisions. And I don't see how changing it a week does anything one way or the other in that. I mean, we can just insist to tell you that we would like certain kinds of information, or maybe you could send it out to us individually in advance so that we have time to think about it if we have questions. I mean, how does moving it do that?
Especially with acquisitions, right now, like council meets tomorrow. So if we had an acquisition we were discussing today, that's a really quick timeline to get materials and information and a BOSAC recommendation to council. It'd be really helpful to have a week just to be able to say, okay, well, this is where BOSAC, 3 were in support, 4 weren't, and here's the recommended price we'd like to move forward with. I mean, it just takes us a little bit of time as staff to get those materials ready for council. When we have just a couple hours to do it, it's tough.
But they meet again in 2 more weeks. Does it have to go the
Well,
very?
often with acquisitions, we're under tight timelines and trying to get things under contract or work with our partners. And so time is usually of the essence there.
And I think it's also if we have because it'll be the first time we hear of an acquisition or decision-making point will be the day of. And so I think it is to allow us to have additional time. If we have a question, we're not entirely sure we want to make a decision that day, we can, right? We can
that's
have a
true.
day or two to ask a follow-up question, get some sort of expert opinion, anything like that. That doesn't mean we have to get it by the next day for town council. We'd have that couple days.
Logistically, I was wondering about this. How does that work with exec session material? We want to, whatever, some follow-up question. How do we all get the answer and then get to chime in without having another meeting, 2
It's-
days later or something?
Right. I mean, ideally, a lot of those discussions take place in our executive session. We try not to do a lot of business over email just
Right.
because it gets tough with confidential things like acquisitions. But in a pinch, we can do that, or we can follow up one-on-one with individual people that have questions. Typically our council likes to see a similar packet that we all bring here with just some of the, the price of the property, what are the conservation values, how does this fit the master plan goals? I want to see maps, and usually we want to get that to our attorney to review in advance. So there's a couple of steps there to be able to get all that information to council with enough time to review it, which is just tough when it's, one day right after the other.
Sometimes there might be consideration that you guys are asking for, like, we would support this if that, so we can follow up on things like that. And sometimes it's like, is the county going to support? Sometimes you have a little time to get a response on that. Necessarily have to come back to BOSAC.
To me, it seems like one of the biggest issues is having, whenever it is you present something to us for a purchase decision, having a lot of data on it, and so that we can make an
Mhm.
informed decision on a property we might not have ever even heard of.
True. Mhm.
Yeah. Any other discussion or should we vote?
We're voting in
Kind of
favor of
vote.
changing to the third.
Yeah, no matter what,
Monday
we're not changing
or
until,
against.
till May. Or really, May is be the same. June will be the first change.
Mhm.
But then going forward, it'll be the third Monday in perpetuity.
Yes. That's, right, that's the vote.
Mhm.
I'm in favor.
I'm in favor. If it benefits council, we serve at the pleasure of council, so yes.
Same. Yes.
No.
Yes.
Nikki?
Good by me.
Good by you.
Okay.
Okay. 3, 4, 5. Okay, 5-1. And do we need to? Is that as official as it needs to be, or do I have to read something?
There was a draft resolution that was included in here, and I will have to print off a clean copy for you to sign.
Okay.
But I can certainly read that if you want. It's included in your packet. But it's just.
Need a motion and a second.
Yeah, what do we need to do?
Ew, yeah,
Well, can the vote we just did?
yeah.
Straw poll.
Okay, I move that we adjust our meeting schedule starting in June to be the third Monday monthly in perpetuity.
Second. Darn.
We have that noted.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
We need to vote. Okay, thank you, Julia. No, that's good. Nikki, what do you think?
About the schedule?
Yes, we have to do it again.
Gotta vote.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, good. Good to go. Thumbs up.
David,
Yes.
Bobby,
No.
I'm a yes.
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 Okay. Vote concluded. Thank you, Julia and Mark, for your guidance.
Thank you for that.
Parliamentary procedure 101.
Uh-huh.
Does Jay vote or is he not? on?
Oh, yeah.
Council
Oh,
doesn't
council,
vote.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
But-
great.
Thank you for that. And yeah, we will keep on track until May, which will be the open house. And of course, we'll be following up with all kinds of talking points for boards and all that sort of thing before we get there.
Okay. And the adjusted dates are in the packet, so we can all
Mm-hmm.
tell Jeffrey to put it into his calendar, but he's not here.
And I will just note that the town is updating its website. So right now there are no meetings on the calendar beyond today because that change is taking place very, very soon. And they've asked me not to populate too many calendar items. So as soon as that town website is updated, we'll get all of these meetings in there as well.
Great. Winter use.
Yeah. So we wanted to bring back this topic. It was suggested in the fall months that BOSEC wanted to have a robust discussion on winter uses. And we just wanted to present a little bit of what we've been up to since the fall months. Really, we also have been wanting to get a better handle on just the types of winter users that we have out on our network. And so what we've been doing, we do have these new great cameras, and we've been putting them up at some of our busy trail locations in the winter. It is cameras, it's taking quick images of people and it's a manual exercise. Okay, here's someone cross-country skiing, here's someone fat biking, here's someone snowshoeing. Just to be able to try and get a sense for how people are utilizing some of these winter trails. We started doing that at the end of January. We're going to continue doing that through March. So we have a little bit of data right now. I don't know if Alex or Tony have any insight on what we've been seeing to date out there.
Pretty basic study, like Ann was saying.
Put the microphone in.
Pretty basic study, like Ann was saying. We're just trying to take a look at what type of use is happening at these busier trails. We've got a camera at Upper Flume, kind of the intersection of Gold Run Road and Upper Flume. One at Tom's Baby, kind of close to the trailhead, and one on Sally Barber Road. And yeah, they've only been up for about 3 or 4 weeks, so we don't have a huge amount of data yet, but it's been pretty interesting. Obviously Sally Barber's quite a bit busier than Tom's and Upper. Fair amount of shared use there. Couple Alpine users headed up Baldy. But yeah, it's been pretty interesting to see. Tom's Babies has a fair amount of fat bike users. But that's just giving us a better understanding of what type of winter use is happening there and allows us to manage for it better. I think there's some discussion in November about, do we consider that when we create and plan a trail? And even with the loops discussion, can we incorporate winter loops based on some of this information? So that's just kind of what we're trying to figure out. And, you know, if we see more fat bikes in certain areas, that can lead to, you know, thinking about those loops and how to manage certain areas. So.
Do you intend to keep these cameras at their same locations, or would you move them around, or?
Rotate
Okay.
about every 2 weeks or so.
Oh, okay.
Have some new locations.
Yeah, so we're gonna still continue to move around in the French Gulch area, then also around in the groomed Gold Run Nordic Center area as well to try
I
to
don't know
get-
which trails I need to improve my form on.
So how are you breaking it? Are you doing hikers versus snowshoers? Just
Yeah,
how are you
we've-
parsing it? And then,
We're looking specifically, and it's really looking at their feet, you know, we're
Yeah.
trying to.
Yeah,
determine-
exactly.
It's hard, like sometimes the
Cross
alpine
country.
skier, cross country, right? You really have to
Fimo stuff or
pay
back-
attention to those details. But yeah, I think our categories are, we got cross country skiers, snowshoe users, alpine, and fat bikes. And then dog, just walkers, hikers. We're even counting dogs, stuff too, just to
Are they 4?
just.
And I think in the similar format to our trail counters, we're just doing like a detection of a picture. You know, we're not saying the person's heading out or they're heading in. It's a detection with the camera to kind of keep it similar to our trail counters. And we're still working with these new cameras and setting up positioning and sensitivity, and camera burst. So we're kind of still refining that as we go along.
And do you think you'll be getting more of these cameras if these turn out to be a real useful tool? Do you think you'll ask for more like next year so we can broaden the?
I think so. I think they also come in handy for us on wildlife. So if that's something we, you know, need in the Golden Horseshoe, say, for example, we could do that.
Are they expensive?
They're not expensive cameras. We just pay for a monthly data plan basically for each one, just because we do have that wireless transmittal.
I would say, yeah, right now, probably the most expensive time is just staff time, setting up, readjusting, going through the data to, you know, the more cameras we set up, obviously, the more time, more data you have to go through.
How did you determine the locations?
So we were just trying to take, just looking at 2 specific kind of different areas, right? We're looking at the groomed Gold Run Nordic Center and seeing what that groomed system actually provides and who's actually using it. And then we just kind of went to French Gulch because it's a popular area that we're getting counts in, but actually really just didn't know what types of users are using that. And I think with moving the cameras around every 2 to 3 weeks, we can kind of capture that use, but giving it still enough time, just weather dependent, whether it's been stormy for a while. Obviously, we see more skiers, and when it's not stormy for a while, we see more hikers or fat bikers in that area. And that's kind of the tricky part. We're also trying to document that within that is, did it snow the night before? What's the weather like? So we can kind of dictate those numbers.
Well, that'll give you some amazing data.
We hope so. But just really want to understand what all we can provide for you in terms of winter use, or what is it you'd like to understand a little bit better, or anything else that we can look into and get for you all.
And I think just on a background for normal trail construction and layout, you know, we always try to take in consideration summer and winter use, especially those north-facing trails. We're already seeing a lot of cross-country skiing. You know, we try to plan that trail out so it is compatible. But also sometimes we run into property boundaries, mining tunnels and claims. And so a lot of that is also hard to have a great, perfect alignment for cross-country skiing due to these unforeseen errors. But we do always try to take that into account when we're laying out a trail, is thinking about summer and winter.
Duke?
Well, I looked at this as a chance just to, I don't want to go too long, but just kind of an open forum on winter use. We see, like it was stark in the state of the open space that our winter use numbers are almost the same as our summer use numbers, but it doesn't feel like we give it as much attention. So I just thought it'd be healthy to talk like philosophically what we feel about our approach and where do we want to adjust it and where are we good and look towards the future. And yeah, I think that it is a big mystery what kind of users we have. So this data will be huge. I'll just start by saying I worry that we're underserving beginners, hikers and snowshoers, and it's hard to quantify how many of them there are, but I get the sense that there are people that maybe they can't afford to go to the ski area or they choose not to, and they don't have all the equipment or the expertise to fat bike or Nordic ski, and they just want to go for a walk. And they're bombarded with signage saying like, don't walk here, don't step on these tracks, or it's too deep or whatever. And I don't know, I've thought about this a lot, so I'll just quickly give my spiel, but I think that I love that we're overlaying the master plan on all this. It was great with our project list and the state of the open space. And, I think these are great lens to look through this stuff. And I think that we are maybe coming up short with access and inclusion in winter users. I think, it's not just bilingual messaging and wheelchair friendly trails. It's also, like I say, different user groups and experience levels. And, we talked about the website specific messaging towards fat biking, and I agree with the conditions thing. That's a healthy piece, but like, I'm kind of an extremist. I don't even think we should be gentle with our messaging about like, don't sink in and don't step on these tracks. It should be like, if you can, don't step on ski tracks, but enjoy your time. I think we have the ski area and some Nordic centers, and that's where you are getting a curated experience where you can expect a nice groom to skate on, or a nice snowshoe trail, or a nice downhill trail, or whatever. But in our open space, I would like to see it just be equal and sort of welcoming to everybody. And I include our rec path on that too. I know that we groom it, but like, are we going to tell a dog walker they can't go because it's too soft? No, we should never do that.
If I can take a different approach, because I have a feeling that hikers and dog walkers greatly outnumber skiers, Nordic skiers. And so if we're talking about inclusion, then I'm wondering if we're backwards there. It's possible, but I haven't seen anything that suggests that people shouldn't be on those. I've seen the sink or whatever, think before you sink, which, I think maybe that's got its place in certain areas, but some of the more popular areas, like say Wellington Trail, I'm thinking about Gold Run Road, Wellington Trail, those places are heavily walked and skied, and, even, alpine ski, because people are hiking up and skiing all the way down. I'm sure you've seen, I've seen tons of backcountry tracks. I just feel like etiquette is not like, I don't want to take away signs where you could suggest to people, because I think if the majority of folks say on Sally Barber Road and they want to walk in a big group 8 across, maybe, the Sally Barber Trail isn't great, but Mountain Meadows might be, you know, which is a nice flat road that you can walk on. So I guess what I'm trying to say is we can accommodate both. I'm not offended by the signs that say don't, you know, think before you sink or try to use the right trails, because I both walk and ski depending on the conditions or whatever the shape of my knees are in that day. So I'm not offended by that, but it sounds like maybe is it the language that you don't like?
It feels elitist to me,
Okay.
especially for people that don't. There are some people that like probably don't even know what cross-country skiing is or don't know
Right.
that their footprints might hamper someone's skiing experience. And then on the other end, skiers don't need any help. They can go wherever they want. You know, it's a free for all. If you're skiing, you can go anywhere. You know, you kind of have the advantage of the equipment that can float over this stuff, and maybe you have skins or whatever.
But not really though, because if you are skiing, it's deep. You could be, you know, thigh deep in an area trying to break trail versus, I get what you're saying. Like there's areas where it's single track that,
Natural surface.
natural surface. I don't know. I don't know. What is it? Where you just can't, like say, Turk's Trail. That's you know,
This is going to be mixed.
it's gonna be mixed. And I've found that the fat bikers tend to be super, I don't see a lot of like, you know, 5 inches of snow and then you see a fat biker trail. Usually I watch it progress. Like I'll go out and you'll see ski tracks for a morning and then it'll sort of get used a bit more. And then you might see foot tracks and then eventually you'd see fat bike tracks. That's sort of like the co-op version, I guess. But when it's deep powder, you can't walk anywhere else either. I don't know that anybody can just go off trail, but I don't think skiers necessarily can, nor can fat bikers.
I mean, that's an exaggeration what I said.
I get what you're saying. I definitely get what you're saying.
This time overcoming these obstacles, you know, I don't think they need any special treatment.
I think one thing that we've talked about before that might kind of get to what both of you are saying is the awareness that there's multiple users on these trails and saying like, please beware, there will be skiers on Sally Barber, just like there will be walkers on Sally Barber, and both are welcome here. Because I do agree with Duke that there are far fewer places for walkers to go for people that are coming here that don't have access to equipment. And so we don't want to make them feel like they're not welcome at the few places that they are able to walk on packed down trails, which there aren't that many places. But I think it may be what we can start to think about, because I like your point that it's access is more than ADA, it's more than language, it's abilities, it's familiarity with winter sports or summer sports for that matter. And so kind of and this might be part of our sign package, but just like an awareness and appreciation that there are multiple users in particular areas could be a good starting point for this conversation. And if you're post holing, you're probably not going to go much further than 50 feet.
Do we keep, on our website, do we keep up to date, like on individual trails and their conditions in the winter?
Yeah, we do have that website, Bobby, with a list of maybe 40% of our trails on it are more popular trails that people would like to use, larger ones that conditions of packed, unpacked, soft, that you can look at.
Because that would be a good place to direct people, like especially when we're talking about beginners, to some of the easier trails and what their conditions are so that they don't get too discouraged.
Yep.
By finding themselves on a steep hill that's tricky to maneuver on.
We work with the Breck Tourism Office as well and provide recommended loops and walks with them and what's on the bus transportation that can be accessed summer and winter. Too. But yeah, I think Duke, you had a great point. I think going out in French Gulch, you can see somebody walking, you can see somebody heading out for a backcountry, you can see somebody cross countrying. Like, I think that's one of the great parts of our system is that any particular day, you can do anything you'd like out there, which is pretty awesome. But making sure everybody's aware of it, acknowledging and respecting those activities.
Yeah, and agree, you don't want to make a walker because that's the only thing they can do, feel bad that they're ruining somebody's skiing experience because they both have a right to be there.
But I don't think it's a problem when it's wide enough to have a sign that says trail
Yeah.
walk, because it does
Mhm.
destroy the skiing experience if somebody is, say, running. And I'm talking about elitist runners, perhaps, not just somebody walking, but running on those trails also leaves you without the ability to, kick and glide. But, then again, it's going to snow, it'll be fine. And this isn't really that's the nice thing about wintertime, is that the conditions will just erase themselves and start all over again. And it's not the end of the world. But it's interesting because B&B and maybe Turks to some extent are those aren't beginner really trails necessarily. Maybe B&B is, but it depends on like what's beginner. Like, is it flat with no incline? Is it, close to civilization on a road? It's just it's really hard to define.
Another interesting thing is it's not like the muddy meter, which is resource damage.
Right.
It's important.
Yeah.
This is like just your experience.
Experience degradation
Yeah.
for various people. But it's true that you realize skiing, you have a very short window of like when it's great conditions to go. That window slams shut the minute it's like 30 degrees out, right? And then you're done. And then you may not be skiing unless you want some luge experience for yourself. But it's a tough one.
I wanted to chime in on this one. It's interesting hearing everyone's opinions. I think there's really varied ways of thinking about this. I tend to align with what Duke said. I think for a more curated experience, which Jeffrey would have represented if he were there, but he's not. But I would make the argument that if you want that curated, like kick and glide, that's why we have Nordic centers, and we have really wonderful Nordic centers that provide experience for those skiers who want this ideal experience where there's not, multiple different modalities of tracks going on. But I do think that when we focus on equity and inclusion, I agree with Kristen and Duke that we need to not assume that one modality is superior to the other or compromising the other. And then just on a different note, one thing I've noticed is there's a lot of traffic in French Gulch, as we know, in the winter. And I've run into a few parties where they're lost. Like, I think when we think about signage, it seems like our signage is more suited for the summer. But when you say park at B&B and head out to intend to go on B&B, but you don't know where that is, there's so many different variations of where people are headed that people just get lost if they don't know otherwise. So I think as we move forward, maybe in the years to come, as winter use continues to increase, we need to think about how our signage need to change for winter use. And I don't know what that looks like, but just something to have on our radar when we think about how tracks are going all over the place.
I totally agree, Nikki. Just yesterday, I had someone ask me, they ended up at Country Boy Mine again when they're trying to go to Turks Trail because there is enough local foot traffic that goes that way. And so it looks like a trail, especially in the wintertime. Same with Pole Line, same with V3, where you don't necessarily see those shortcuts in the summertime. And in the winter, they look like very well-established trails, but they're actually not. So I don't know how you solve for that, Tony, but it is definitely a concern. People are finding themselves in areas that they didn't mean to be.
The good news with winter use is the areas in which people generally are traveling are more concentrated. So it's not as dispersed as we see in the summer, at least anecdotally, that's my sense about it. Like we see so much traffic on B&B and Turks and in certain areas, Sally Barber, of course, but less so otherwise distributed amongst our system. So maybe it's not as big of a challenge as it seems initially.
Jeffrey's not here, but something he's always um pursuing.
Harping is the word. you
Yeah,
want.
harping, yeah, is parking for winter. And we joke like Rack Jack comes to mind as the one that we always joke about. But and I think it's mentioned in the master plan, like, I think it's important that we are pursuing winter parking opportunities. I don't know if we are, and I don't know how realistic they are, but I think we do owe it to the access component to make sure we're providing the best we can in terms of parking as well.
Yeah, and I think at some spots, like up on Western Sky, it is really a matter where the plow can cut in. Say, right, we lost that little hammerhead area by what's his face's old property. Sorry, I'm blanking on his.
You're getting it pretty.
Yeah, Prospect. It's right where you crawl over under the power line and then you're up
Oh.
Prospect Trail Road. Bruce.
Campbell's, yeah.
Yeah, Bruce Campbell. So now that's that's all fenced off. So that's no longer there. But if you go further out by where that gate is, if plow were to cut in, and I know that's a county road, but if there is something there that can just be done. I know there's people sleeping in their cars up on those little 2-3 spots that are sort of on, before you get to that. So, but, those provide opportunities for people to get to. And we get into these equity conversations, you're going to go down a very hard rabbit hole because you are going to find, okay, well, you get in your car and drive to go to a Nordic Center and pay to ski on most of those places where we do want people to be able to get out of their house and just go somewhere. But
Yes, but Dave, in Nordic, the cost of Nordic skiing is like substantially less. I mean, it's pretty reasonable, relatively speaking, for most, as compared to downhill.
yeah, I just think we can all ski on and walk and hike. I don't know if we're creating a problem where none exists, to a certain degree. I don't feel like we've got, no, I don't know. Maybe that's just my own anecdotal thing. Like, I don't love it if I have, if I'm skiing where somebody's just post hold, but it doesn't last. It's not that big of a deal. It's a little thing. I worry that a lot of the elitism that we seem to be seeing, we're not seeing on the trails, we're seeing on Facebook. So I just want to be clear because we get irritated because we know those people and they're saying these things and they kind of, does it exist out in the field as much?
As soon as you start B&B, there's a sign on the ground that says keep tracks separate.
And nobody does.
I know, but
Yeah.
that's like, you get past the kiosk and I don't know, is that still there? Sorry.
No, I think we took that down. I think we put it up for a request and then we decided it really doesn't make sense. Yeah.
Yeah. I like the all are welcome
Yeah,
thing,
but you're right. I mean, this could be,
it's a solution looking for a problem in a lot of ways. I really don't think applying the equity lens is a fair way to look at skiing versus walking your dogs. There's a lot of elitists walking their dogs and not picking up the dog crap, like whatever. We could
I
always,
looked, this is Facebook, but the town open space put a think before you sink thing out
Yeah.
there.
I think on the
right?
groomed trails, that makes sense. On groomed, the stuff where they are actually grooming. What's that? No, I don't know about the rec. I don't know about the rec path. I don't go, but I'm talking about like where you're grooming up on Gold Run, down towards the Nordic Center, or if you're on those like Dry Gulch and those trails that do have a set track, then, and I don't even know if that's open for fat biking, but that's part of the Nordic Center. So is that where that's appropriate? I don't know.
I think like Nikki said, the Nordic Center, that is curated and they can,
Yeah.
enforce whatever they want to maintain that experience. I think when it becomes open space and not Nordic Center, we shouldn't be doing it.
I think it's an interesting question about, especially for the bike path, just because that is a public location. I don't know. I guess I don't. It would kind of ruin the experience for skiers, especially skiers who want to have a free experience, but on the other hand, it is a public rec path that is meant to be used for the general community. So I think policing who's able to use it is kind of outside of our jurisdiction.
We kind of do that in the summer though, too. We do police the types of bikes that are allowed on there.
That's policy.
Mhm.
I'm not saying we as a group, I think everything has its sort of use, like fair use or whatever it is that might be compatible with the conditions or the location or what. I don't. just throwing
I
it
think
out
of
there.
motorized vehicles is more of a safety issue than like a user
Yeah,
experience issue.
I can
though.
see that. That's fair.
Thanks. Anyway, I don't know if we need to like make a decision on
Yeah.
anything right now, but I think it's an interesting discussion as we continue to think about how to overlap our plan and as we have opportunities to create new trails this summer and fall, to think about what that means for winter use and for multiple users. So I appreciate this discussion.
Thoughts? You too?
No, it was a good conversation and was more listening on this one. I just think our efforts to kind of gain knowledge of who the users are is commendable. And we definitely put some energy and some investment into that. But yeah, I also grow wary of us, this commission or even our town open space over defining or over programming how people use their forest land. So I think we just need to be cautious with that, because I personally don't like to be told how or when or where, if I'm accessing the forest at my will.
And I think like the one caveat to that is safety. So motorized vehicles or like directional trails or, only mountain biking or no mountain biking in particular cases where it's a safety concern might be one area where we have a little bit more criteria potentially. All right, super.
Thanks for letting us talk about it.
This is great discussion and we'll keep you posted as we start to collect more data and get a little glimpse into who's using the trails. So we'll report back on that. Thanks.
But I don't know if Jay is still on. Do we have
I don't believe that he is.
council matters? Or do you guys have any that you think should be on our radar?
Just to keep that joint meeting on your calendars, April 9th.
Yep.
5 o'clock. And if you do have specific agenda items, I'm not sure who's crafting that agenda yet, but if there's something that you're really burning to talk about, let me know and I can certainly collect those topics.
And I just had one other, for the vice chair role, I took on a new position, which is going to involve a lot of national and international travel. I've pretty much carved out Mondays, or at least the third Monday, so glad we voted that way. But I probably won't be able to achieve all that I want to do as vice chair to support Duke, so kind of want to put that out there to the commission that when and where we could replace me as vice chair would probably be recommended. Or how we do that.
And I know Duke, you had been thinking maybe if you all want to think about it and could make an appointment at next month's meeting, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you for your service.
Congratulations.
Congrats.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Excited for you. I do have another matter for you, and it is regarding an acquisition that we currently have under contract, and our town attorney said it's okay to update you all in open session on this. The Little Daisy property. We are working on a lease for the tenants that are on there. And there's an interesting quirk with our town code in that if town council does a multi-year lease or any kind of multi-year agreement that kind of spans different fiscal years, you have to go through a 2 hearing process and an ordinance, which just takes time, right? So you would introduce it at 2 different council meetings, and then it takes about 30 days for that ordinance to take effect. And we want to make sure we have a lease ready when we take title. And so our strategy is to do basically a 1-year lease to start. And then that gives us time to work with council on a multi-year, longer term lease. Just those are sort of the constraints we're up against just with our town code, but we want to obviously take care of the tenants that are in there. So that's kind of our strategy, and we hope to close soon.
A 1-year lease doesn't have to go through that whole
Correct.
meetings process.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's the way around that so that we can get a lease in place when we take title.
And then a multi-year lease will be negotiated during that process.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And then we have time to bring that to council and go through that process.
Right.
So yeah, that's all I have right now on that.
Any other matters?
I have one very important other matter. Who is supposed to be plowing the parking spots on the Baldy side of Sally Barber Trailhead? If that's even a trailhead, where the new subdivision is on Baldy, where Sally Barber Road comes out at the top of Barney Ford. There's like a designated parking, like only in between these sections, but nobody's plowing it. And I've seen a lot of people get stuck.
Oh, really? Yeah, I was up there a couple weeks ago and it was getting plowed.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It wasn't plowed after the last big storm, and then
Okay.
a bunch of cars got stuck, and then now there's just like this huge sideways berm, so you have to kind of park up there.
Okay. Usually the county handles a lot of our trailhead plowing, so we'll get in touch with them and see what's going on. That area is kind of particularly, it's shrunken a little
Yeah.
bit with the new homeowners and the property development in there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so without plowing, it makes it so like one car can park there legally.
hard to turn around with the other cars are parked. Yeah.
And so I saw a lot of people park there illegally because no one could park in the
park.
parking. So
Oh, thanks for bringing
We'll
that up.
see, maybe.
just my little
Latest.
pet other matter that I needed to bring up.
Thank you.
Trailer too. Now I see dad. That's where you go.
It's literally for the choices and do. Actually.
Anything else? Great. Motion to adjourn.
Excellent.
No, exactly. All right.
Second.
Yeah, no exec session, right?
Mm-mm.
Okay. I move to adjourn.
I second.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thanks. Thanks, Nikki.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.